The stars screamed in silence. Somewhere beyond the Veil of Trion, in a sector where the light of suns hadn't reached in millennia, the flagship Sovereign Mercy cracked under pressure it wasn't built to withstand. Hulls folded inward, as if clasped by invisible fingers. Admiral Kylvath of the Voltrax Dominion stood unmoving on the bridge, crystalline eyes reflecting the devastation that unraveled before him. Drones shrieked warnings in dozens of languages. Fleet signals vanished mid-transmission. Ships didn't explode. They were unmade, like thoughts forgotten mid-sentence. This wasn't war. This was erasure. Enemy forms detected in all vectors. The AI reported, voice trembling though it had no throat. Phase signatures consistent with Nitherian constructs. Estimated survival, 0.04%. That's generous, Kylvath said softly, fingers tightening on the edge of the command rail. He watched one of their core citadels rupture like a fruit, venting 1,000 years of dominion into vacuum. For 10,000 cycles, the Voltrax had reigned undisputed. They had catalogued, codified, and controlled half the known galaxy. Biological, life bent the knee. Synthetic life signed treaties. The Voltrax did not beg until now. Dispatch the Omega beacon, Kylvath said. But do it. A burst of light speared from the dying flagship, a ripple through the galactic lattice. A call for aid, untraceable, unforgeable, desperate. Sent in every tongue known to the stars, every frequency, every dimension of sound and sense. And the galaxy stayed silent. Allies, vanished, subjects, busy fortifying their own borders. Not even the sibling empires of Thal or the machine airarchs responded. It was as if the Voltrax had ceased to matter the moment they ceased to intimidate. Almost a flicker, a single ping. Weak, unencrypted, laughably primitive. Origin, Sol 3, human territory. Message reads, received, sit tight. The bridge went, still. Silence pressed tighter than any enemy weapon. Kylvath frowned. That's Earth. Commander Uralshen, his aide, leaned in. The barely interstellar species, aggressive, emotional, the ones who vaporize their own moon base over. A gambling dispute. They believe in something called spite engineering, another officer offered. Apparently it's when they make things worse on purpose to punish the enemy. Kylvath turned. They received the Omega beacon? Yes. And that was their response? Yes. Have we wronged them before? Not directly. There was a failed trade. Summit. Their delegation brought fireworks, I remember, and live animals. They claimed it was symbolic. Kylvath processed this. We requested salvation. They responded with sarcasm, possibly confidence. It's unclear. No ships emerged. No diplomatic parties, just that message. The entire Dominion's survival now hung on a race known for arguing with kitchen appliances and uploading cats into neural archives for entertainment. Hours passed. The swarm approached the second core cluster. They would arrive within a cycle. The Dominion's elite science council proposed collapsing a star, suicide before assimilation. Then, without ceremony, a vessel appeared on the Dominion's border. Just one. It had no markings, no signal handshake, no visible weaponry. It was angular, symmetrical and wrong in the way that only something human could be, like it had been built by genius on a deadline and with a grudge. It hovered. The Voltrax mobilized half a fleet to intercept. The ship didn't respond. It didn't move. It simply existed. And then the enemy disappeared. Not fled, not destroyed, disappeared. The Nitherian swarm, which had consumed planetary systems like oxygen, was no longer registering anywhere in the sector. No residual phase wake. No battle data. No debris. No trace. It was as if the threat had never been there. Scan again, Kylvath ordered. Already have. 30 times. What about the human vessel? Gone. Where? Everywhere. The last data ping suggests it quantum shadowed itself into 12 locations simultaneously, then vanished again. Kylvath said nothing. He simply turned slowly to face the observation deck. The stars, once distant and cold, now seemed unnervingly close. Watching, the Dominion's capital erupted with theories. Some believed Earth had harnessed ancient precursor tech. Others claimed they'd allied with something worse than the Netherian. Conspiracies flourished. Truth withered, until Earth contacted them again. This time it was a simple burst transmission. Consider that a favor. Next time, send snacks. Kael'vath nearly crushed the comm crystal in his hand. He summoned the diplomatic corps. Invite them, he ordered. To what? To explain themselves. The diplomatic request was routed through 77 encryption layers. The reply came in a handwritten message, scanned and attached as an image file. Cool. Where's the nearest neutral bar? An envoy was dispatched. 4 of the Dominion's finest minds, fluent in 17 combat dialects, equipped with every known form of psychic shielding. They landed at Outpost Zero, a human facility orbiting the dwarf planet Ceres. It wasn't a military base. It wasn't a government hub. It was a bar. A bar with weapons-grade shielding, AI bouncers, and what appeared to be a karaoke night underway. The alien diplomats stepped inside and were immediately assaulted by sound, scent, and something called deep-fried diplomacy. One of them had an allergic reaction to the air. Another cried at the jukebox. At the bar, a man leaned against the counter sipping something blue. He wore a t-shirt that read, "I paused a galactic crisis for this." "You're the envoy?" the diplomat asked. "Technically, I'm the janitor. But sure, I'll talk. Who authorized your intervention?" he smirked. "You did. You sent a call for help. We helped. That ship, not important. It defeated a swarm older than your species. Still not important." The diplomat's crystalline fingers curled. "You cannot just—" The man turned, slowly, smile fading. "You sent a call," he said quietly, voice flat. "Not an order, not a threat. Call. And you know what humans do when someone calls for help?" He leaned in, eyes hard. "We answer." The diplomat said nothing. "You look down on us because we fight. Because we build messy, chaotic, illogical things. But here's a secret. War isn't chaos to us. War is familiar. Intimacy under fire. We don't build clean things. We build brutal things. Ugly things. But we build them fast. And when the universe tries to kill us," he tapped his chest, "we learn faster than it can evolve." "Why now?" the alien asked quietly. The human shrugged. "Maybe we're bored. Maybe we like underdogs. Or maybe we're just sick of empires thinking they're gods." The transmission ended before any further questions could be asked. 3 hours later, the Dominion's Central Fleet received a data package. It contained schematics for repairing their fractured shielding systems, a catalog of exploitable weaknesses in the Netherian neural net, and a playlist titled "Songs to Unmake Swarms 2." The final note read, "You're welcome. Next round's on you." Kael'vath stared at the data crystal. His empire had faced extinction, cried out for aid, and been saved by the one species they had never taken seriously, not through superior firepower. Not with armies or fleets, but with something worse. A lone ship, a joke, and the unmistakable scent of something far more dangerous than power. Confidence. They had cried out for gods, and Earth answered, with a grin. 2 weeks after the swarm vanished, the Dominion sent a fleet of their most discreet surveillance crafts toward Sol 3. Officially, it was to open formal negotiations. Unofficially, it was to confirm Earth hadn't stumbled upon some long-buried god tech or made a pact with the outer darkness. What they found was worse. Earth was abnormal, chaotic, unoptimized, utterly inefficient. One hemisphere was locked in a political meltdown over carbon pricing, while the other was launching a toaster-sized satellite called Bob. The dominant species, humans, bickered, laughed, danced, protested, and argued with each other in public forums for hours at a time with no coherent result. And yet their technology didn't match their temperament. It exceeded it. Hidden between orbital debris fields and derelict shipyards were constructs too advanced to scan. There were phase-locked engines humming without fuel, energy readings that bent known physical constants, and autonomous platforms that ignored gravitational decay. Human scientists debated string theory on one hand, while simultaneously constructing weapons that operated on something they casually referred to as null space puncture logic. One drone managed to slip into low orbit and capture footage of an experimental ship vanishing mid-flight without a wake. It simply blinked out of existence. A nanosecond later, it was 400,000 kilometers away, sitting stationary with the pilot calmly eating a sandwich. No rituals, no ceremony, no glowing. Eyes are cultic chanting. Just practical insanity. The Dominion classified all findings. Publicly, Earth remained a volatile, underdeveloped curiosity. Privately, it became a critical anomaly. Orders were issued. Establish communication, form rapport, and above all, do not provoke. That directive lasted 6 days. The Voltrax border. Authority intercepted a human cargo vessel that strayed too close to their strategic systems. The vessel had no military credentials, no known weaponry, and its pilot refused to respond to standard challenge codes. Protocol dictated detention. The Dominion sent 3 interceptors, non-lethal boarding, precision strike if needed. 17 seconds after engagement, all 3 Dominion vessels vanished from sensors. Not exploded, not jammed, vanished. A 4th vessel was dispatched, this time with full authorization to initiate defensive measures. The Dominion expected resistance. What they didn't expect was for their 4th ship to reappear moments later, with a different paint job, refueled tanks, an apology note welded to the side, and a playlist called Oops, Our Bad. The note read, "We thought this was a prank. Didn't realize you were serious. Here's your stuff back. Maybe teach your interceptors not to target a diplomatic freighter named Hugboat 9000. Dominion High Command nearly declared a containment level alert." But Kael'vath intervened. The Admiral convened a closed council, requested full data from the failed intercept, and watched the playback in silence. The human ship hadn't fired a shot. It had evaded every sensor lock, reversed a tractor beam, and reprogrammed 2 enemy AIs using a meme. Yes, a meme. A looping image of a raccoon with a crowbar and the caption, "Step aside, I'm a professional." "I want to speak to one of them," Kael'vath said, eyes narrowing. "Which faction?" "Any of them, whoever thinks they're in charge." That led to another revelation. There was no unified Earth Command. Sure, there were federations, councils, even a thing called the Middle Management Accord. But no singular authority. Instead, Earth operated on what one diplomat described as high-functioning anarchy, with occasional potlucks. Worse, the human who had answered the original Omega beacon, the one who neutralized the Netherian incursion, was untraceable. No name, no rank, no digital imprint. Just that same T-shirt on multiple security cams. Eventually, through a combination of favors, bribes, and one extremely confused betting pool, Dominion intelligence traced him to a station in the asteroid belt, Outpost 0. The man went by Dax. No surname, no official history, just Dax. Human male, age undetermined, possible veteran, possible fugitive, known bar tab enthusiast. No 2 reports agreed on his appearance, but all agreed on one thing. He didn't ask for authority. People just acted like he had it. When the Dominion's envoy finally got a secure meeting, they found him nursing a drink while soldering a cube that blinked with every forbidden wavelength. "You're the one who saved our fleet," the diplomat said. Dax looked up, squinting. "Saved is a strong word. I just got bored." That fleet represented 10,000 years of order, and 10 minutes of screaming. You neutralized a galactic threat. Dax shrugged. They weren't that galactic. The diplomat flinched. "You understand what that swarm was, yes?" "Oh, sure. Nasty things, built to adapt, learn, hunt, all teeth, no chill. And you dismantled them, paused them." Dax corrected. "Big difference." "How?" "Wouldn't help if I told you." "Try." He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "See? You guys build like clockwork. Everything in sync, precise, predictable, which is great. Until someone figures out the pattern, then it's over. And humans, we build like jazz, improvised nonsense. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it moves differently, untraceable. You can't predict what has no rhythm. The diplomat blinked. That isn't terrifying. Exactly. Kael'vath watched the recording later, studying every tick, every shift in tone. The human was calm, not boastful, casual, as if he didn't realize the scale of what he'd done, or worse, did and simply didn't care. He leaned back in his chair, mind racing. What scared him wasn't the swarm's defeat. It was the implication. The humans had tools they weren't deploying, a mindset that wasn't being taught, and an entire species that seemed completely unconcerned with galactic norms. Kael'vath summoned his aide. Send a gift to the human, to their entire species, something symbolic. Like what? He thought for a moment. A star. A star? A minor one, unclaimed. Let's see what they do with it. The message was dispatched. Within 3 hours, Earth responded with a thank you note. A series of absurdly detailed plans to turn the star into a multi-species resort called Sunburn-topia, and an attached waiver for the use of any solar flares in promotional stunts. Kael'vath rubbed his temples. This is a mistake, he muttered. You regret aiding them? I regret not noticing sooner what they were. Which is? Kael'vath didn't answer right away. He watched the playback again. Dax calmly drinking while soldering a device that may or may not have broken physics. The smile. The ease. No. Fear, Kael'vath said finally. No reverence, not even ambition. They're not trying to dominate the galaxy. Then what? They're entertaining themselves with it. The aide didn't respond. What could they say? That night in the Dominion capital, a statue was erected in secret. A new section was added to the Vault of Anomalies, labeled simply Earth, and across the stars other empires took note. Ships once bound for conquest slowed. Treaties were quietly redrafted. Surveillance increased, not out of respect, but out of something far more primal. Curiosity edged with fear, because the Voltrax Dominion High Arbiters of Galactic Supremacy had cried out for help, and Earth had answered, casually, effortlessly, and just maybe. Sarcastically. Worse yet, they didn't ask for anything in return. That was the part no one could explain. Why intervene? Why save an empire that had never shown them kindness? Why destroy a threat and vanish before the applause? The galaxy whispered theories, secret alliances, ancient prophecies, a second human empire hidden in the void, but none of it fit. Because if there was one thing consistent across all data collected, it was this. Humans didn't move like rulers. They moved like something older, something dangerous, something free. And somewhere, drifting between stars, a ship with no designation blinked into existence, hovered in silence, then vanished again, just as quickly. No announcement, no demand, just presence, as if Earth were listening, watching, waiting, not for permission but for the next call. 3 weeks after Earth returned a gifted star with an annotated blueprint for converting it into a luxury amusement park, the Dominion's Cultural Intelligence Division collapsed from burnout. Their top linguists couldn't decipher half the Q acronyms. Their behavioral analysts quit after being subjected to human satire disguised as documentation. One agent disappeared entirely, last seen muttering something about Florida before requesting voluntary memory wipe. What was meant as a simple diplomatic overture had turned into an interstellar crisis of identity. Humanity hadn't just misunderstood the gesture, they'd reinterpreted it as performance art. Still, Kael'vath persisted. He understood what others refused to see. This wasn't mockery. It was signal. Buried under absurdity was a dangerous kind of clarity. Earth was probing, testing. Not out of aggression, but curiosity, a trait the Dominion had long since suppressed in the name of order. And that made them unpredictable. So he authorized something unthinkable, a joint expedition. The Nitherian swarm hadn't been exterminated, just stalled. Fragments were still out there, scattering through dead space, evolving, calculating, preparing. Kael'vath proposed a cooperative operation, humans and Dominion side by side, tracking the swarm to its point of origin. The assembly erupted in protest. Sharing military intelligence with primitives was unthinkable. But the Admiral invoked his override. He didn't want Earth's help. He needed it. The delegation arrived in silence. One shuttle, no escorts, no display of force. Inside was a single human, a woman in a threadbare hoodie and mismatched boots. Sipping instant coffee like it was a sacrament, she introduced herself as Mallory. No rank, no last name, no ceremony. She smiled as if she'd just wandered in by accident. "You're the representative Earth sent?" the Dominion liaison asked, baffled. "No, I'm the one who was awake," she replied, sipping. "You called early. Time zones, you know." Kael'vath watched her closely. No visible weapons, no armor, not even a data pad. Just a casual, almost reckless air that radiated the same strange energy he'd seen in Dax. It wasn't arrogance. It was boredom. The kind predators wore when prey forgot they existed. She reviewed the swarm data in minutes. Dominion tacticians had spent years building projections, analyzing every variation of swarm behavior. Mallory looked once, nodded, and said, "You're looking at it wrong." "How so?" Kael'vath asked. "You're trying to map it like a virus. But they're not spreading. They're iterating." "That makes no sense. Organisms don't iterate. Not unless they're machines pretending to be organisms." That quieted the room. "What do you mean?" Kael'vath asked. She set her cup down and leaned forward. "They weren't designed to adapt. They were designed to test. This isn't evolution. It's feedback." Kael'vath stiffened. "You're saying they're running simulations?" "No," Mallory replied. "I'm saying we are." Kael'vath processed that in silence. His aides exchanged glances, unsure whether to dismiss her or escalate the conversation to theological crisis. Mallory stood and walked to the star chart, dragging a gloved finger across the lines. "You keep looking for swarm clusters like they're breeding grounds, but if I were trying to create the perfect predator, I wouldn't let it reproduce naturally. I'd partition its data, isolate performance metrics, and recompile code based on failure points." She circled 5 systems. "These aren't colonies, they're labs." One of the aides scoffed. "You're basing this on what? A hunch?" Mallory didn't answer. She reached into her coat and pulled out a chip. "We intercepted one of the command spores last month, took it apart. You know what we found?" "What?" "Echoes," the chip hummed, projecting a feed of code. "It was alien, definitely, but not in structure. It looked disturbingly modular, commented even. Whatever made them didn't just want weapons," she said. "They wanted feedback. These aren't swarm directives. These are performance reviews." Kael'vath leaned in. "So we're dealing with an architect." Mallory nodded. "And it's watching." That shifted the room's mood from skepticism to something colder. "Why haven't they attacked again?" Kael'vath asked. "They're waiting for the data to compile," which means the next version won't be a swarm. That sentence landed like a missile. Because if the swarm had been version 1, and Earth's interference had been part of a test suite, then everything up to now had been a draft, and what came next would be tailored, purpose-built. Mallory continued. "We traced the signal stack backward. Most of it was noise, camouflage, but deep in the burst there was something different." She tapped her chip again. A waveform emerged, impossibly dense, almost harmonic. "That's not code," Kael'vath whispered. "That's language. We think so too. Encrypted. Self-scaling. Probably recursive." "What does it say?" Mallory looked him dead in the eye. "We're not the only ones watching. The Dominion Council issued a quiet panic. Orders were given to escalate defense production. Communication with outer colonies was restricted. Contingency shelters were activated. But Earth did something else entirely. They opened applications, not for soldiers, Not for scientists, for artists. Kelvath didn't understand. What possible role could creativity have in the face of existential annihilation? Until one of his spies sent back a feed from a secret Earth installation, an underground compound lined wall to wall with whiteboards. Humans were drawing, sketching, painting potential enemy configurations, designing scenarios, writing fiction, predictive fiction, not war games, stories. What if the swarm became sapient? What if it copied human emotion? What if it pretended to lose? Kelvath watched in stunned silence as humanity did what no empire had ever considered. It made imagination a weapon. Children wrote horror stories that were dissected by military tacticians. Philosophers debated consciousness with comic book writers. Engineers studied speculative myths for patterns. And worst of all, it was working. Simulations adapted. Threat models improved. Human intuition, random, erratic, and deeply emotional, created vectors no Dominion AI had ever considered. The swarm's evolution was no longer just being countered, it was being anticipated. But with that clarity came something darker. In one of the prediction labs, a man named Rowan discovered a signal within the signal, a pulse buried so deep it had to be intentional. It wasn't part of the swarm. It was a meta tag. Translated loosely, it meant, build better adversaries. Rowan brought it to Mallory. She read the phrase once, twice, and then said something no one wanted to hear. This isn't war. It's recruitment. That realization shattered the entire strategic board. The swarm hadn't been testing defenses. It had been auditioning opponents, looking for those rare moments when survival wasn't luck, but strategy, where adaptation wasn't a glitch but a feature, where sentient species chose to become something more in the face of annihilation. Earth hadn't survived by accident. It had been noticed. Kelvath convened a new war council. No longer was the question, how do we stop them? It became, what do they want us to become, because now it was clear. The architect, whoever or whatever it was shaping the galaxy not through conquest but through pressure. Every swarm, every incursion, every anomaly. It was all curated escalation, not extermination, preparation. Kelvath stared at the latest chart. The swarm had gone silent again. No signals, no movement, but now he understood. They were waiting for results, not just from Earth, but from everyone, because this wasn't a test of strength, it was a test of potential. And humanity? Humanity was passing, but at what cost? As Kelvath turned to Mallory, he saw something he hadn't expected. Not pride, not excitement, regret. She spoke softly, as if to herself. We could have stayed invisible, just small and strange on the edge of the map. You wish you had, he asked. No, she admitted. But I miss not knowing what the stars really were. Which is? She looked at the chart again. A stage, and somewhere, deep within a dormant swarm lab, drifting through null space, a light blinked green. Compilation complete. The Dominion's final fleet never made it to the front. 17 carriers, each bristling with weapons capable of extinguishing stars, vanished mid-jump. Not destroyed, removed. No debris, no distress. Just silence, like the void itself had swallowed them whole. That was the opening move. What followed wasn't an attack, it was an invitation. Across dozens of systems, dormant swarm structures blinked to life. Not armed, not hostile, but unmistakably active, glowing with signals patterned like language, laced with recursive logic loops only partially interpretable. Even Dominion AI began to choke on the data. It wasn't noise, it was structure, the kind that looked back when observed. Mallory sat alone in Observation Room Theta, staring at the lattice feed. What started as an intelligence report had evolved into something stranger, a conversation, or the illusion of one. Each time, Earth's AIs ran simulations. On the swarm's new transmission patterns, the models changed, not just in output, but in method, like the swarm was watching them watch it, and learning. She keyed into the secure channel. Kelvath, we've got signal deviation, again. His voice crackled through. How many permutations? 412 since local noon. It's adapting faster than we can simulate. He hesitated. Or it's letting us believe we're catching up. She didn't reply. The silence said more. What unnerved her most wasn't the speed of iteration. It was the tone. There was something almost playful about the way it danced just out of understanding, like it knew where the line was and enjoyed hovering beside it. A lesser mind would have seen chaos, but Mallory had learned to see the music in the noise. Rowan entered without knocking, face pale. We got it, final sequence, it locked. Mallory stood. Locked how? As in, it stopped evolving, flatlined. Kelvath's voice cut in. Confirmed on our end. What changed? Rowan hesitated, holding up a printed diagram, a retro. Contingency in case of data contamination. The schematic wasn't swarm-made. It wasn't even alien. It was human. A child's drawing, uploaded weeks ago to the simulation index, featuring a strange creature made of mirror shards and question marks with a caption scrawled in crayon. This monster doesn't fight. It makes you solve it. The swarm had integrated it. Mallory stared at the drawing, then the stream, then back again. That was it, Rowan whispered. The missing node. It wasn't a weapon. It was identity. Kelvath's voice dropped low. Are you saying we gave it the final piece? No, Mallory said. We gave it the final question. That's when the signal changed. Not erratic, not hostile, intentional. A single tone perfectly balanced between known harmonic frequencies, modulated through gravitational lensing. It wasn't swarm, it wasn't even alien. It was designed for them, Earth. And the Dominion both received it at the same time. A data burst containing coordinates, a directive, and a name. The name wasn't in any known language. But when translated through human phonetic algorithms, it resolved into a single word, Scimitar. The directive was simple. Attend. Kelvath convened the Joint Council. Half his people wanted to evacuate. The other half wanted to strike preemptively, but Mallory overruled both. They're not baiting us, she said. They're debuting something. Rowan added, this isn't about survival anymore. It's about qualification. Earth deployed a single ship. Dominion sent 3, not for show, but as redundancy. Their target lay in a system devoid of natural life, orbiting a black hole stabilized with lattice girders 100 miles long. The station floating above it wasn't built. It was grown, a construct of swarm biotech shaped like an infinite, not impossible architecture, optical illusions rendered physical, geometry that obeyed mood rather than math, and waiting there at the center of it all was Scimitar. It looked like nothing and everything. A swarm form layered in reflective scaffolds, humanoid silhouettes flickering through as if trying on identities like clothing. Male, female, neither, all. Every frame a conversation with its observers. Kelvath stood in the observation pod, every instinct in his ancient bloodlines screaming to run, to purge, to forget. Yet his mind whispered what Mallory had already voiced. This wasn't an enemy. It was an answer. Why reveal itself now? Kelvath asked. Because we're ready to ask the right question, Mallory said. And we might be the only ones who know how to hear the answer. Rowan uploaded the child's drawing. The image hovered beside Scimitar. Instead of ignoring it, Scimitar bowed. The black hole behind it pulsed once, an artificial singularity resonating with harmonic subfrequencies. Then came the voice, not spoken, not transmitted, felt. You are divergent. That was all. Mallory stepped forward. What are you? Scimitar responded not with language, but with a flood of images. Civilizations burning not out of failure, but completion. Species tested, elevated then gone. Not extinct, not conquered, recruited. Each sentient species given a trial tailored to their potential. Not for dominance, but for contribution. The galaxy wasn't a battlefield, it was a curriculum. You called for help, Kelvath said, voice shaking. But you never needed it, Samita rippled as if amused. Another pulse. You did. Rowan's knees buckled. We were the test. Mallory looked beyond Samita toward the black hole, now orbiting a second singularity, smaller, sharper, actively forming. A child. No, she said softly. We were the template. Samita shifted, revealing dozens, hundreds of dormant forms around the station, each one patterned differently. Some insectoid, some aquatic. One resembled Earth's ancient myths, another matched nothing at all. All paused, all waiting. Kylvath whispered, "You're building a fleet." Samita pulsed, a response. Mallory exhaled, realization, slamming into her chest. This wasn't about us, this was about what's coming. The final transmission began, coordinates across the galactic rim, patterns beyond known physics, a timeline, a countdown, and at the end, silence. No demands, no threats, only a mirror. Samita's form froze. It no longer flickered. It reflected. Kylvath stared at it, then at Mallory. Why us? Why now? She didn't answer at first, then she reached into her pocket, pulling out that same child's drawing, creased and worn from constant study. Because we didn't fight the monster. She said we imagined it. The Dominion ships disengaged first, not in retreat, but in reverence. Earth's ship remained longer, capturing every waveform, every pulse, every flicker of pattern from the station. Not to weaponize, to understand. As they departed, Rowan asked, the question they'd all been avoiding. What happens when we reach the end of that countdown? Mallory didn't answer. Kylvath did. We find out whether we were students or prototypes, Mallory finished. Back on Earth, stories exploded. The simulation index overflowed with new narratives. Artists, coders, children, everyone, contributing to a strange new frontier. Not to prepare for war, but to explore possibility. Because now they knew. The galaxy wasn't static. It adapted to them. And something else was watching. Not the architect. Not Samita. Something older. Something silent, waiting to see what humanity would become once it finally realized it had never been alone. Not even at the top. And as the final image from Samita faded, one phrase remained embedded in the code, untranslated by any machine, written in a human hand. The call was never for help. It was a summons.